And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our LPM webinar, Strategic Cargo Theft, Evolving Deception and Legislative Efforts to Keep Up. We've got some great presenters and speakers here for you today. With me as my partner in organized retail crime is Mr. Jack Britton. Jack, how are we doing today?
Hey, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking some time out. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate the support. Looking forward to today's session. We've got a lot to cover. But first, we've got to start with a huge thank you to our solution provider partners that are sponsoring today's event. That would be LVT, Genetec, Checkpoint Systems, and Sensormatic. And let me see if we got a little information here about each one of them. Let's start with Sensormatic. Awesome. And thank you, Sensormatic. Checkpoint. Next up, we'd like to recognize Checkpoint for their continued partnership and innovation in the retail, loss prevention, and supply chain space. Their solutions play a key role in helping businesses improve visibility, reduce shrink, and enhance operational efficiency. Please take a few minutes to check out what's new from Checkpoint Systems and visit www.checkpointsystems.com. Next up, we have Genetec. Genetec Inc. is a global technology company that has been transforming the physical security industry for over 25 years. The company's portfolio of solutions enables enterprises, governments, and communities around the world to secure people and assets and support operational efficiency while respecting individual privacy. Based on an open architecture, built with cybersecurity at their core, Genetec solutions can be implemented on premises, in the cloud, or in hybrid deployments. The company's flagship products, Genetec Security Center and Genetec Security Center SaaS, the SaaS model, unify core physical security functions such as access control, video surveillance, automatic license plate recognition, or ALPR, intrusion detection, communications, and analytics. Headquartered in Montreal, Canada, Genetec serves its customers via an extensive network of certified channel partners and consultants in over 159 countries. For more information about Genetec, please visit them at www.genetec.com. And last up is LVT, and I get to be quiet.
Some of the feedback I've heard about having the LVT unit in the parking lot, customers are happy to see it because they feel comfortable parking their car. Their car's not going to be broken into, or they know it's there for a purpose, and that's to prevent activity from happening. So they feel more comfortable coming to shop with us on a regular basis.
And thank you, LVT. And thank you also, LPF, the Loss Prevention Foundation, who is our education partner. You can learn more about certification if you are not already certified at losspreventionfoundation.org. If you're not already certified, why the heck not? If you are certified, however, and you are attending this webinar, you will qualify for 2 CEU credits towards your LPC certification. So please make sure that you keep track of your participation in these webinars because they're worth CEU credits to continue to maintain your certification. There's that little QR code. I put it on the right because the one on the van apparently doesn't work quite as well. But if you grab your device, if you can't do it now, do it at the end. If you're not already subscribed to Lost Prevention Magazine, it is FREE free. So make sure you get it sent to your home, get it sent to your office, have it sent for your team. You can subscribe for free at lostpreventionmedia.com or scan the QR code and get subscribed. All right, that's it for me, Jack. Let's get our first panelist going here, and you can introduce Danny.
All right, leading us off today is Danny Ramon. He's the Director of Intelligence and Response at Overhaul. Good afternoon, Danny. Can you just start by telling us a little about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jack. Thank you very much for having me. As you mentioned, Jack, I am Danny Ramon, Director of Intelligence and Response at Overhaul. I've spent just over the last 15 years of my professional life studying not just cargo theft, but anything that affects the flow of cargo through the international supply chain. In addition to that, the last half decade or so, I've had the honor of being able to work with some really excellent law enforcement liaisons at Overhaul to learn the recovery side of the operation as well as the investigative side, providing post-event support in the event of a theft.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to get my presentation up and running here. And let's see here now. Of course, computer's giving me just a little bit of lag. All right. Here we go. Now you folks should be able to see the slide deck now. Is that correct?
We've got it.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go through this slide deck. We're going to talk mainly about strategic theft in the United States and Canada, what we're seeing, how it's developing, but we're also going to talk about strategic theft in relation to the other types of cargo theft that we see in the United States and Canada as well, because it is still prevalent to see all of these different types of cargo theft. But just to get into it real quick, organized cargo theft nowadays is a different animal than we've dealt with in the before times. And when I say the before times, of course, I'm referring to pre-pandemic, right? Organized cargo theft now is very much a business, guys. They watch Shark Tank. They're grabbing onto all of these buzzwords that are thrown around in corporate America. You know, return on investment, risk versus reward, scalability, diversification. They're taking heed of all of these things and they're incorporating them into their operations as well. And what's kind of terrible for us from that point of view is that while they're learning all of these methods to scale their operations from corporate America, they're not hamstrung by the same types of organizations. Like they don't have to make decisions by committee. They don't have to get approval from a board. The lead time for them to change targets is literally the amount of time it takes for them to physically move from one location to the next location to start targeting that particular type of freight, right? But there's an estimated 90,000 theft incidents in 2024. This is, of course, building off of the 65,000 thefts that happened on rail that was released last year from the American Association of Railroads. This is just within the United States and Canada. And we know that at least 30% of all cargo theft in the US and Canada is fraud-based, and it is growing. It is, traditionally cargo thieves have been very risk averse, and this is a great way for them to lower their risk. It lowers their exposure when performed properly. And I'll get into some of these methods here coming up in a few slides shortly. They can steal dozens of loads a day from behind a keyboard, and they can drop ship it to a number of various e-tailing websites or social media marketplaces or other well-established retail locations that accept third-party sellers. And they can post that for sale on an online marketplace, collect 100% of the profit, and they've never come into contact with the quote-unquote evidence. It's not quote-unquote evidence, it's actual evidence, but they've never come into contact with the stolen cargo, which obviously greatly reduces their risk. Now, when we look at cargo fraud, theft by fraud, theft by deception, strategic theft, whatever it is that you want to call it. There's a lot of different terms for it. There is kind of a perfect storm that's been brewing for quite a while, especially in the United States. And, there's certain parts of the United States that are a little bit more ripe for strategic theft than others. But some of the things, some of the factors that have led to this perfect storm are changing technology is a big one, right? Implementing technology into an industry, things like vehicle trackers and electronic logging devices. It's great. It introduces efficiencies, but it also introduces vulnerabilities, especially when we're dealing with a large population of small carriers, owner operators. These are folks who don't have HR departments. They don't have IT departments. They're not getting mandatory annual cybersecurity or phishing training or social engineering training, which does leave them vulnerable to a lot of the methods that are being used today for cargo theft. Of course, we've seen social and cultural changes. One of the big ones is just a mechanism by which organized thieves are liquidating the product that they steal. Now, traditionally, it's been that traditional organized crime model where there is a fence contact who's going to take a cut, and he's going to send it off to either one buyer or multiple buyers. And usually that's, for straight theft is what we've seen that type of structure being used in. And everyone takes a cut. And so the profit margin for the actual cargo thief is going to go down. What we're seeing now, as I mentioned, with those e-tailing websites, third-party retail websites, social media marketplaces, is that thieves are able to liquidate large amounts of inventory on their own independently, meaning that their margin is going from 40% of the value of the stolen cargo to 80%, sometimes more of that stolen cargo. Unfortunately, what that does is it really lowers the threshold of what is an attractive and profitable load for an organized cargo thief to target, which is why we're seeing a very broad diversification in what's being targeted, even within strategic theft. It's not only the traditional cost-dense items that are being targeted, but we're seeing anything that has an elevated demand. These thieves are very much have their fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the United States of retail purchasing habits. They know if a product has gone viral on TikTok, it's going to be flying off the shelves. And that's what makes a product most attractive to the organized cargo thief, is how in demand it is, meaning he's going to be able to sell it very quickly and realize that profit very quickly and wash his hands of the evidence in his possession, right? Of course, we're also dealing with, economic conditions from inflation and economic uncertainty and widening wealth gaps, less effective court systems, again, varies by different parts of the country. And of course, decreased law enforcement. We've seen the number of cargo theft task forces in this country drop by over 50% in the last 10 years. And it continues to drop. And unfortunately, I think we're down to 5 or 6 dedicated cargo theft task forces in the United States. And 1 or 2 of those are actually combined with auto theft task forces. So unfortunately, all of these factors are combining to make it to where it is much easier for someone who wants to commit cargo theft to do so successfully and without being captured. Let me take a look here. Now, when we take a step back and look at cargo theft trends over the last 30 years or so, anyone who's been in the industry long enough will remember that in the mid-aughts or so, we were talking about record-breaking cargo theft. And it was record-breaking cargo theft. But of course, for the last 5 years or so, we've been saying the same thing. And I think this is very important to put it into perspective, how much more serious the problem we're experiencing now is compared to the problem that we were experiencing in the early aughts or the mid-aughts. We've also inserted a red line in this chart to show the relation of fraudulent thefts within this trend. Now, I fully expect that fraudulent thefts will start, the rate of increase, I should say, for fraudulent thefts is going to start outpacing the rate of increase for cargo theft overall within about the next 18 to 24 months. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. It's not a lot of expertise that is required in order to perform this type of theft. And as more and more people figure out how it's done, we're going to see this start to be definitely the lion's share of cargo theft across the United States and Canada. Eventually, it'll probably spread across the world, but we're definitely seeing it here, and I don't see any signs of it slowing down anytime soon. Now, when we look at the decades-long arm race for cargo theft, it started, there was, traditional straight theft, stealing the tractor trailer while it's unattended. And then we even saw some high value goods, high tech thefts, particularly consumer electronics and pharmaceuticals being stolen. Organized crews were formed. And then we started seeing, industry associations start to rise up in the face of that, particularly associations like TAPA, right? We saw countermeasures start to be introduced, compliance tracking, GPS tracking on these vehicles. We saw the Safe Port Act, which really shored up some of the vulnerabilities at our ports, but we still saw cargo theft rates surge globally. Criminals would adopt new tactics because criminals are like water. They're going to find the path of least resistance, especially if it's still providing them with the profit. So we saw illicit double brokering, which is still a very large problem that is growing. And we saw the continued theft of high value cargo. We get into where we are today. We're dealing with elements of fraud, social engineering. We're even starting to see, AI tactics start to seep their way into the commission of fraudulent thefts. And we're seeing this just continue to worsen. So it is a constant evolution and a continued arms race when we look at the different methods by which criminals are looking to obtain your cargo. Now, double brokering is one of the biggest ones, right? There's a lot of things in logistics that are commonplace and that are perfectly legal, but are not secure. Now, double brokering is definitely one of those. Now, double brokering, if you've agreed upon it contractually and you know exactly what's going on, you've got full transparency into what's happening with your cargo, it can be okay. But what we're talking about largely here is illicit double brokering. So when it's double brokered by an entity that doesn't have broker authority, or they're double brokering it without your knowledge, this is exposing your cargo to additional risk. There's going to be gaps in accountability. There could be chain of custody issues. There could be insurance issues. And ultimately, it can and very likely will lead to cargo theft, whether it's small scale cargo theft that may just be accounted as leakage, or it could be large scale cargo theft up to and including something like a shorted load and an altered BOL, which we'll get into more detail in a couple of slides. So the current landscape for fraud, we're seeing a lot of hacked emails, especially for those small carriers, owner operators, where they will get emails that look very official, look like they're coming from the FMCSA, excuse me, that will direct them to log into the FMCSA website through a link provided in the email. That link will take them to a very official looking website where they will enter their credentials. It will then capture those credentials, forward them onto the official website, plug in those credentials for them, so it actually takes them into their official FMCSA account. So as far as they're aware, nothing untoward has happened. They think they've just logged into their FMCSA account to update some information, but actually now the bad guys have their login information. They can change the contact information. They can change any information that they want. They can start receiving all of the communications for that company. And the victim company might not even know until months down the line when they get a call from a cargo theft investigator wondering why their company made off with a $250,000 load of cargo, right? We're seeing phishing phone calls, load ID theft from load boards, carrier impersonation, up to and including people spending $8,000 to $10,000 to vinyl wrap an entire tractor. Again, folks, this comes back to the ROI. They're willing to reinvest in their operations and put down $10,000 on a vinyl wrap, knowing that it's going to get them 4, 5, 6, 12 $250,000 loads. That's an easy investment to make. Even if it only gets them one load, that's still 25x return on investment. That's an easy decision to make. For where fraud is going, where we expect it to be tomorrow. Again, AI, I think, is going to be a big driver of innovation within cargo theft. We see a lot of the same tactics and trends in fraudulent cargo theft that we see in just general social engineering and phishing scams, right? So we're now starting to see AI-enabled, or we expect to see AI-enabled voice cloning and maybe even video cloning. So people who are asking for, video calls to verify identities. AI can generate real-time video of individuals that, if you're not properly trained, can be kind of hard to pick out. Expanded cyber attacks. Gone are the days of a phishing email being easy to spot because it's riddled with typos and grammatical errors. These phishing emails are now being written by AI chatbots who sound like they have a PhD if you want them to, right? And of course, we're dealing with automation that's enhanced by AI and synthetic IDs and load boards. And we know that these folks are already operating fully functional 24/7, 365 call centers overseas, where folks who show up there are getting, hourly pay, benefits on par, if not better than what's typically available in the local area. And they're treating it like actual companies and real jobs, because to some of these people, it is their real job. So we do expect that this arms race is going to continue. All right. Of course, once you've had a loss, chances are because you don't have a full layered security program in place, or if you do, it's because you're not following the guidelines put in place by that security program. It's not just the cost of the lost cargo that's going to impact the bottom line of your organization. There's a number of other factors. At Overhaul, we put a little bit of work into studying what the total cost is. I know some other organizations have as well. The general industry benchmark is somewhere between 3 and 7x the cost of the cargo is going to be the impact on the bottom line for a variety of reasons, right? Anything from brand damage, market share impact, increased insurance costs, the distraction to your personnel to investigate this issue. And of course, at the end of all of these additional factors, you're going to go ahead and increase your security spend anyways. So I'm always a big advocate of being proactive with your security. I'm a very belt and suspenders guy, if you know me. And I do believe security should be proactive. I mean, even in my organization, we count a recovery as a loss because the goal is to prevent theft. And it is so much easier to prevent a shipment from being stolen than it is to go and get it back once it has been stolen. But when we look at the US, the main things that we see driving increase and driving innovation within the US supply chain security realm in terms of cargo theft are these 4 issues right now. It's strategic thefts. We'll get into that in a little bit, but basically these folks will have a couple of dozen individual MOs that they can mix and match and layer depending on which target they're pursuing. And if that target then just implements one security fix to fix whatever vulnerability caused them to lose a load, rather than implementing a full layered security program, the dozens of MOs that they have that they can mix and match and layer provides them with a path of escalation, right? So if they go in through one method and you shore up that vulnerability, then they've got another method that they can go, and then you'll have to shore up that vulnerability, and then they'll have another 5 or 6 steps beyond that. So what I always tell folks is if you've been the victim of cargo theft once, thieves are, if thieves steal something, they've got a way to sell it, right? They're not going to steal something just to sit on it. And if they've got a way to sell it, that's a potential income stream for them. They're not going to give it up. So if you've been the victim of one cargo theft, chances are they're going to continue to pursue that product until it's no longer the lowest hanging fruit in their area. Another big one that we're seeing is large scale pilferage. I'll get into that a little bit later as well, but there's basically 2 buckets of criminal in there. But we're seeing a lot of people who re-careered themselves during the pandemic. It wasn't just white and blue collar workers who re-careered themselves, is criminals as well. And we've seen a lot of them gain in tradecraft and gain in experience and reinvest into their operations. It's the same thing with rail thefts. We're seeing quite a bit of rail thefts happen across the country. Just the nature of transiting by rail, you have much less control and much less visibility over what's happening on that rail. So it does lead it to be much more vulnerable. We are also seeing an increase in violence and driver confrontation. I do want to specify, though, lest anybody accuse me of being an alarmist, that this is not increasing at the same rate that cargo theft overall is increasing. It's increasing at a much shallower rate, but it is still increasing. And as I am concerned with driver safety, it's something I do want to bring up and make sure everyone is aware of. Luckily, that is one of the easier ones to guard against. I know everybody's always looking for the magic bullet when it comes to security, and for avoiding violence and driver confrontation within cargo theft in the United States, it's pretty easy. The number one thing you need to do is do not have your drivers park outside of destination facilities overnight. Have them park farther away, 50, 100 miles away in a secure yard, and not show up until their actual appointment time. I did want to show you guys a quick my version of a heat map. I know everybody loves, those weather system heat maps, and I love them too. But I always want to caution people against looking at a heat map and saying, okay, where the red spots are is where we need to implement more security, because the risk of theft of your cargo doesn't necessarily come into play based on where it is. The risk of theft to your cargo comes from what is your cargo? Is it being targeted? And really, where did it originate from? Because that's what's going to determine what criminals are in those areas, what tactics they're going to be using, and therefore what countermeasures you need to employ. So this map tells us what MOs are being practiced in what parts of the country. And I do update this every quarter. And at this point, I do understand it's getting to the point where every tactic is being practiced in virtually every supply chain node across the country. But trust that we can actually tie these to actual incidents and individual crews in some cases. But it's been interesting to see this map evolve over the last 3 or 4 years, especially seeing the fictitious and strategic crews spread from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. They're now prolific throughout the country. And we've also seen a lot of criminal carriers and brokers start to pop up along this map as well. Now, probably the most prolific strategic theft crew within the United States and Canada right now has commonly been referred to within the industry as the Sing crew or the Sing gang. And at this point in time, referring to them as a single organization is incorrect. We know that that crew was split up by Operation Overloaded, implemented by the California Highway Patrol. I believe that was in 2022. It might have been in 2023, but I believe it was 2022, where they captured, quote unquote, the head of the snake for that particular strategic theft group. And that was true, but they didn't capture everybody. And what happened is everybody who escaped that net essentially fled, spread throughout the country, and formed their own splinter cells. So what we're dealing with now is a network of cargo theft crews with over 500 individual members, over 50 individual cells across the country. And they are the most prolific intelligence sharing group we've ever seen within cargo theft. They will share paperwork packets that are required at various shipper locations. They will share the drop-off procedures and policies for a lot of the big box receiving facilities. They will share what MOs and tactics are going to work best against certain targets and certain companies, because intelligence gathering is one of the functions that they also perform, right? This crew has been dubbed the Khalistan Cargo Cartel by John Cannon, one of our senior law enforcement liaison. He's put quite a bit of research and effort into this crew. He determined that the lion's share of the personnel in this crew comes from the Khalistan region of India. So that's why we've named it the Khalistan Cargo Cartel. And they do have ties to Indian crime syndicates. Now, these folks will enter the country both legally and illegally, a lot of times through work visas, which very often they will overstay, but they will also enter specifically through states that have lax ID requirements. There's a few states in the country where it's relatively easy to get an official government-issued commercial driver's license that only lists one name. So, for example, mine, if I were to get a commercial driver's license by this method, would say first name Daniel, last name no name given, and that is an official government ID. And that, of course, can create a lot of traceability issues. We're dealing with an individual who has one name, and you can only positively identify them if they provide the same form of identification at 2 different locations. Oz obviously causes a lot of problems. And it's not always a cargo thief who's showing up that has that format of driver's license, but we are seeing it more and more frequently. These folks are also not just establishing fake carriers or fraudulent carriers and fraudulent brokers, they're also purchasing in mass MC numbers and US DOT numbers. You can actually go onto Facebook right now and search "Sell My DOT" and find a number of Facebook groups that are advertising essentially illegal activities to transfer MC numbers, offering bonuses if you will transfer your email address and phone number as well, offering additional bonuses on top of that if you will also transfer your load board login credentials. These are things that are happening every day, and it seems like some people don't know what it's actually for, but it's pretty scary. So if we look at the map at the top right of this particular slide, all the states that are colored in green are the states that we have confirmed that members of this crew have fraudulently uplifted cargo from. It's very likely that it's occurred in at least a few other states. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure we need to fill in Nebraska at this point, and probably Kansas as well. But again, these are just the confirmed locations that we know that they've fraudulently uplifted cargo from. Now we're going to get into the specific MOs within fraudulent theft, strategic theft. Again, there's a lot of different phrases for this. I think right now the industry standard is strategic theft, right? And strategic theft covers all the different methods of fraud that cover the different, whether it's technology, social engineering, or anything else, are all going to be captured under the umbrella of strategic theft. It was originally called fictitious pickups in the industry because fictitious pickups was the type of strategic theft that we were seeing by and large. We've since learned that strategic theft is a type, I'm sorry, fictitious pickup is a specific type of strategic theft. It's one of the less sophisticated types as well. And we'll get into some of the more sophisticated types here coming up. So originally Southern California was the nexus for theft by fraud or strategic theft. It's where we saw, 80+% of that activity throughout the country was typically being logged in Southern California. Again, we've seen it spread since then. The members and the tactics have spread, from coast to coast. We've definitely seen them in Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas, Ohio, and the tri-state area in New England as well. As I mentioned before, they've got a couple dozen different MOs that they can mix, match, and layer depending on their target. Some of them, and there are actually additional crews as well, not tied to the Khalistan cargo cartel. We are aware of at least one other transnational organized crime group practicing strategic theft within the U.S. They practice primarily on the eastern seaboard, but they do operate from Mexico all the way up into Canada, and they do have connections to Canadian organized crime and Mexican cartels. We actually know that the ringleader for this particular crew lives in Cincinnati and is an ex-Russian national. Very interesting because it's not the typical organized crime structure that we see within cargo theft. But something to note about this crew is that they operate several warehouses and distribution centers in the eastern United States. And some of our three-letter agencies within the U.S. government have identified by surveilling some of these warehouses that the folks that they have patrolling these warehouses are known Mexican cartel members. To me, that indicates that these folks are not just involved in cargo theft, but they're also involved in other forms of illicit trafficking. And you can imagine what that might be when they've set up a supply chain network that goes from Mexico through the United States and into Canada. These folks do primarily, when they're practicing cargo theft, they do primarily utilize the slab method. And again, we'll get into the slab method in a couple of slides, but it is a specific type of strategic theft. One of those specific types of strategic theft, is what I call the shell game or transloading, where you're moving the cargo out of the original trailer that it was shipped in and into a different trailer. A lot of times this is going to come with altered paperwork as well, but it originally started just switching the equipment. And unless law enforcement or some other investigator has reason and legal cause to open that trailer, there's no reason for them to, because it doesn't appear as though that is the stolen trailer, right? You're essentially laundering stolen cargo by putting it in a different tractor in a different trailer. At that point, that's no longer what law enforcement's looking for, right? Unless you've got physical evidence that can point them directly to that particular new trailer. So they'll do this often to frustrate investigations and recovery efforts. You see here, I keep moving my cursor, which causes me to not be able to advance, but here we go. The shorted load altered BOL method. This is a name I came up with myself. So if you don't like it, please submit all complaints directly to me. Is essentially just that. Technology has advanced to the point where you can take a picture of a document on your smartphone, turn it into a PDF, edit it, and have it printed out, and it looks just like the original did, with the exception of whatever information you've changed. So what's happening is folks are these criminals are targeting primarily big box retail receiving centers, because they know that these places are constantly busy and have very rigid receiving procedures that they're not going to change for just one shipper or have a bespoke procedure for every shipper that's coming into their facility. They just don't have the ability to do that. So knowing this, the thieves will do just what I mentioned. They will take a picture of the BOL. They will alter the piece count. They will alter the pallet count. They will alter the weight, and they will alter the seal number. And then they'll arrive at this receiving facility. They will hand the paper BOL to the dock worker. And these types of locations, LTL shipments are quite common. It's not surprising to them to open a trailer and see one or two pallets. So if it matches the BOL, everything is cool as far as they're aware. They're going to unload it and go about their day as normal. Well, it's not going to be until days in the best case scenario, more often weeks or even months, especially if it happens in the holiday shipping rush. It'll be months later when the receiving department at the receiving facility gets in touch with the accounting department at the shipper and says, "Hey, the shipment that you sent us a couple months ago was supposed to have 40 pallets. It only had two." And then they start matching it up, and then they realize, hey, that carrier actually, between that load that we just discovered and today, they've carried 200 loads for us. Let's start looking into all of those. And we've seen in a lot of those cases, 90% of 200 loads is gone. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. Of course, one of the best things to guard against this is going to be an electronic immutable BOL, so that the receiving facility is looking at the same document that the shipping department sent as well. So another one, and we've touched on this before, is illicit double and triple brokering, right? Loads will be double or triple brokered, sometimes quadruple or quintuple brokered, and eventually getting into the hands of a criminal carrier. And through this process, again, they're changing the paperwork as it goes down the line. They're not necessarily forging it. They're just, creating new paperwork because it's a new commercial agreement. But as they do this, sometimes the information on that BOL is going to change. So instead of it saying, 60-inch OLED TVs, it's now going to say TVs. And then maybe the next one will say consumer electronics. And then maybe the next one says freight all kinds, but at any point throughout there, it's changing the paperwork. Again, it is further laundering the freight once it's been stolen, frustrating the chances of investigation and recovery. And one of the things I want to point out here, and I'm going to harp on this one a little bit because it is one of my pet peeves, is the replacement of the rivets on the back of trailers with nuts and bolts. And one thing that, in addition to that, you need to be on the lookout for is what's pictured here in this slide. Is even though it looks like rivets, they're bright and shiny and do not at all match the rest of the hardware. I do want everybody to be aware of an invention called Chicago screws. Chicago screws are what are pictured in the inset on the top left side. And they are designed to look like a rivet, but they are actually a double-ended screw. So the inside, one side will have the smooth rivet head, and the inside will have either a Phillips or a flathead that they can unscrew with a screwdriver. But even with that being on the inside, it's still possible to unscrew this from the outside, just putting friction on that rivet head and kind of rotating it. You're able to get that unscrewed, and then you can open that trailer without disturbing the seal and have the original seal show up to the destination still intact. Some of the red flags you can look out for, and this is not comprehensive. These are just some of the more common ones, and it's worth having flyers or posters out at all of your loading docks to have people on the lookout for this. But beyond that, I always tell folks, look, if you make security everybody's job, it's really nobody's job, right? Because everybody has their own job already. You need to make sure that you do have a person on site whose sole responsibility it is to look out for red flags, to be in charge of the security of that facility, and to just be aware, to maintain that situational awareness. But some of these red flags, again, the modified trailer hardware, nut and bolt versus a rivet. This one seems obvious, but you'd be surprised. Make sure that the guy who handed you the driver's license is the guy whose picture is on the driver's license. The two pictures that we have here, the picture of the California driver's license, that driver's license was handed to the dock worker by the individual who's pictured there holding the clipboard. They are not the same individual. They're not the same nationality. And as a matter of fact, when I showed this slide to California Highway Patrol, they're like, hey, that guy standing behind the trailer, that's Oscar Torres. We know him. He's a known cargo thief. But beyond this, again, some egregious examples, paper placards, paper with a Sharpie marker on it and duct tape is obviously wrong, but we also see magnetic placards. And again, magnetic placards are common and legal, but not necessarily secure. I will say if you see a magnetic placard in combination with a license plate that is zip tied to the grill of the tractor, specifically at chest height, at least please dig into it more. Those two things in combination indicate that they're remarking the tractor multiple times per day. The magnetic placard can be swapped out very easily, and quite often the driver will have 2 or 3 of them in the cab of his truck. But the license plate, they're zip tying it instead of screwing it because it just takes less time, and they're doing it at chest height because they'd rather not bend down if they're going to do it 3 or 4 times a day. Again, some of these things are easy to spot, and these criminals are not working harder than they have to. But that just because you don't see that doesn't mean that they're not fraudulent either. But also be on the lookout for signs of the trailer being recently remarked. I don't know what the contrast is on the screen that you're watching right now, but the bottom middle image on this slide shows ghost numbers underneath white spray paint, where this trailer had been remarked after it had been stolen. A very common tactic after a full truckload theft, but it's also a very common tactic to just disguise the equipment as they're going into a shipper's location, so it doesn't look like the same equipment that might be on a do not load list. And again, more red flags. This is just more examples, right? And a little bit. I've got a picture there of the zip tied license plate on the bottom right, zip tied at chest height. There's obviously a spot on the bumper for it that has threaded holes for the screws, but they choose to put it there. Shows that they're just not putting that much effort into it. But this also shows a tractor that's kind of in the middle stages of being a cloned tractor, right? These folks decided to impersonate a legitimate carrier, a nationwide carrier, and they got magnetic placards. They put a logo on there, but it's not the official logo. If you go to the actual website for Wright Transportation, it's that blue and yellow logo that does not have a lightning bolt. So if a tractor like this shows up and it's pulling a trailer that's got spray paint numbers, please at least ask more questions. I would very much suggest that you just turn this driver away. We're not in the kind of capacity crunch that we used to be, to where every driver matters. I think at this point we've got the ability to turn folks away, and I think we definitely should, especially if you see something like this come through your gates. But also keep in mind, especially in California, commercial license plates have a specific format. And the folks who do this, even if they screw the license plate into the bumper, if they're swapping license plates out multiple times a day, very likely they're not swapping it out with other tractor trailer license plates. They're going to be swapping it out with passenger vehicle license plates. And you can tell by the number letter combination on a license plate in California and many other states whether that license plate belongs to a passenger vehicle or a commercial vehicle. So definitely check that. And obviously, if there's a passenger vehicle license plate on a commercial vehicle, somebody swapped the license plates and something untoward is going on. Okay, this is another one, an example of why the nuts and bolts on the back of a trailer are a pet peeve of mine. It seems like more people should know about it. It seems obvious to me, and it seems obvious to everyone I tell about it, but then there's folks who should know about it who don't. This is a message that's been heavily redacted because I'm not going to put anybody on blast. This was a LinkedIn message I received from somebody who sells quote unquote high security seals made in China. This was that individual's profile picture. It's a picture of a seal hasp that with a quote unquote high security seal that has Allen wrench bolts on the actual seal hasp. So that profile picture is a picture of a vulnerable seal where that seal means nothing. If that seal and that hasp showed up to my receiving facility, I'd say that seal means nothing. That tells me nothing at all. That gives me no assurances that nobody's been inside that trailer since it left origin, because you absolutely can open that and reseal it and have it look like it's been undisturbed. And of course, this is what we see when we see them on the side of the road or in parking lots when they've removed them, and they just leave them on the ground sometimes, or if they're caught. This one was actually taken because the criminal was caught as he was trying to reattach it. Law enforcement came up. Again, I'm sorry, it is a pet peeve, but just keep in mind, every single trailer and container on the planet comes off of the factory line with nothing but rivets. There are no nuts and bolts. The only reason to replace those rivets with nuts and bolts is to be able to enter the trailer undetected. Whether that's to double load and insert more cargo and be able to charge twice for one trip, or whether that's to perform fraudulent cargo theft, none of them are good outcomes, and none of them are something you want to put up with. And so again, just a diagram of all the potential places that they can replace. Obviously, the seal hasp is the easiest one. It gives them a single point of failure, where they can just have one piece of hardware replaced with a nut and bolt, and that allows them access. But they can do the same thing to the guide plate or the rod guide. It may cost them an extra couple minutes because instead of unscrewing one bolt, they're unscrewing 4 or 6. But that's a small price to pay for $250,000 of cargo. Now, again, we're going to get into some of the other methods of theft besides strategic theft, because they are still some of the biggest drivers of loss in the supply chain in the United States. One of those, as far as I'm concerned, is large-scale pilferage. There's a couple of different methods of this. One of them also kind of borders fraudulent thefts, and that's misdirection at destination. Now, again, these folks are going to do the same kind of thing where they're going to target the large receiving facilities that are busy throughout their entire hours of operation. They're going to intercept drivers as they arrive, and they're going to tell them the one thing that every driver wants to hear at the end of his trip. Hey, listen to what I'm going to tell you, follow my instructions, and we're going to get you out of here real quick. And that is music to a driver's ears. He absolutely wants to get unloaded and get on his way with the rest of his life as soon as possible, because they are not paid by the hour, right? But these folks are going to approach them outside of the facility. They will very often be wearing official looking uniforms. Very often they will get the logo on a polo. You can get them very often from eBay, or you can just order it yourself and have it made. They will be wearing high-vis vests. They will be carrying a clipboard, because a clipboard is an international sign for "please let me pass," right? But they're going to look very official. They'll say, "Hey, go ahead and park around the corner behind that truck." And of course, around the corner is outside of view of the CCTVs. And I'll meet you over there, and I'll walk you in to the check-in desk. I'll introduce you to Dave, and we'll get you out of here real quick, right? Driver goes and he parks. The guy starts to escort him, and then he says, "Oh, you know what? Just go talk to Dave. I need to take care of this other truck." But of course, as soon as the driver's out of eyesight, we've got accomplices coming in with cargo vans, unloading as much as they can off of those trailers. Currently, we're seeing it in both Southern California and the Bay Area, as well as a little bit in Dinuba, California, so just north of Southern California region. But we're starting to see it spread a little bit east as well. We've started to see some of this happen in Nevada a few times, and I believe we've even recorded one in Utah as well. So we are seeing this method migrate as well. Other forms of large-scale pilferage, both pilferage and rail theft have thieves that fit into 2 buckets, and I'm going to start playing this video while I talk. And those 2 buckets are, there's the crews who perform their thefts. They'll travel hundreds of miles to perform their thefts, whether it's pilferage or rail theft. And these are the folks who are more organized. They have reinvested in their operations. They've purchased more vehicles. And like I mentioned, this is their job, right? This is what they wake up every day to do. This is why they will travel a couple hundred miles at a time to steal cargo. One of the most worrisome things about this one for me, we see the individual approaching right now, the back of the trailer. That's the man who had followed the driver into the truck stop to make sure that he was going to be there for more than 10 minutes. Because believe it or not, they were able to get all the freight that they wanted from this trailer in under 5 minutes. From the time they drove up to the time they drive away is less than 5 minutes. But the most worrying part about this video to me is this broad daylight. This happened at about 11:30 a.m. in Nevada. I count no less than 14 eyewitnesses throughout the entirety of the video. Not a single person called police. Nobody called police. And some of it's pretty egregious. We'll see some folks here. We'll see a driver there just walking past. I mean, he spends a good 90 seconds watching these folks doing what they're doing. It's clearly not what they're supposed to be doing. Nobody calls the cops. These are the videos, folks, that keep me up at night. But again, these folks we've seen travel hundreds of miles. By and large, they've got the training and the knowledge and the know-how and the resources to be able to invest to the point where they would have commercial vehicle drivers or the training to drive those commercial vehicles, but they're not actually stealing the entire tractor trailer because they know that brings increased law enforcement pursuit. If they steal it out of the trailer, put it into an unknown vehicle, it makes it much harder for law enforcement to pursue. Then we've also got the local pilferage crews. These folks do not travel very far from their home in order to perform these thefts. These are the folks who saw all the mainstream media news stories in 2020 about cargo theft and said, hey, I see trains stationary for days at a time in my neighborhood. I know in the industrial area of my town, I know that there are tractors and trailers sitting outside of the facilities overnight, and they've decided to start practicing it themselves. Now, unfortunately, these folks are not typically dedicated cargo thieves. They're usually involved in other types of crime as well, very often violent crime. And because of that, they have been known to bring violence and or the threat of violence into the commission of cargo theft. And this is what is driving the increase in violence and driver confrontation. But it's just something to be aware of with these folks. They will quite often target the DCs that they know in their area. Uh, have desirable merchandise flowing through them. It's usually not very difficult for folks to figure out what product flows through what warehouse simply by just asking around or hanging around in the area. It's not difficult to find these things out. But then we also deal with the rail pilferage folks, which is another type of pilferage, right? But there's the rural folks. Again, the folks who will travel hundreds of miles to perform these thefts. They are much more organized, and we've seen these folks traveling in convoy. They've realized that the limiting factor to how much cargo they can come home with is not how much time they have to perform the theft; it's how much capacity they have to carry that cargo back. So we have seen these folks traveling in convoy. They're typically led by a cargo van that's filled with people and burglary tools, so sledgehammers, crowbars, angle grinders, impact drills, etc. And then they're trailed by 3 to 5 box trucks that have one driver and are completely empty. And they will very often fill up all 5 of those box trucks before they return home. And then, of course, I think we're all familiar with the excuse me, the urban area or metro area rail pilferage crews who don't travel very far from their home to do this. I think we're all familiar with the flash mob style train theft that happened in Chicago last October. This theft was actually initiated by an organized crew that's from the area. But then they used that flash mob to cover their escape, right? It created chaos and created far too many people for the police to pursue. I believe there were 3 or 4 arrests in this particular case. Those were just the folks from the neighborhood who were too slow to evade the cops. The organized folks definitely escaped capture in this particular case, and they're still operating, not just in Chicago, but we see them operating a lot of the metro area intermodal choke points across the U.S. Atlanta, Detroit, L.A., Memphis, those types of places. And then, of course, we also deal with the traditional straight theft crews. These are the folks that we used to deal with pre-pandemic. They're still around. They're still performing theft at the same rate that they used to, and maybe even an increased rate, actually definitely an increased rate, but they're not increasing at the same rate that strategic theft is increasing, and they're not increasing at the same rate that large scale pilferage is increasing. But it is still something that you want to be aware of. Again, the traditional best practices are still in play here. Team drivers don't leave the load unattended. Make sure you don't stop for at least the first 200, if not 250 miles. And all of those things are still going to apply for that. I believe this is the end for me. If anyone wants my contact information, you're more than welcome to take a screenshot, or I will be providing this presentation as a PDF for anyone who wants it. But if you'd like to learn more or get the open source intelligence that I post as often as I can, definitely look me up on LinkedIn and connect with me there.
Danny, that was awesome, and some really incredible examples that you were able to share there as well. Thank you very much for all of that. It's always so valuable to have those visuals, and they're not always available like that, So when you say, well, here's what you should look for, and everybody's kind of picturing in their mind what that might look like, but when you can actually show them, no, this is what to look for, that's the most powerful. So. Absolutely appreciate that. I know we have a few questions in the Q&A. If we can grab a couple of those, and then for the folks in the audience, Danny he is going to stick around for a little bit. He did say that he could, if we don't get to him right now, he'll answer some while the next speaker is going.
Absolutely.
So, but there's a couple of them here, though, I think that we could probably expand upon a little bit. one of the first questions we had was about, can you explain in greater detail as to how vinyl wrapping equipment is being used for cargo theft?
Yeah, absolutely. So vinyl wrapping the tractor, and that's a great question because I think I kind of sped over that because it makes sense in my head. But vinyl wrapping the tractors is essentially impersonating a carrier, right? I showed that one that had the wrong logo on the magnetic placard. A vinyl wrap is the next step in the evolution of this particular cargo theft Pokemon, right? Spending $10,000 to get it wrapped in all orange, for example, if they're trying to impersonate that all orange carrier. I'm not going to name any names because that would be uncouth, but you get the point. If you're trying to impersonate a carrier, you're going to get more trust if the carrier that you're impersonating is a large national trusted carrier. And obviously they tend to have very recognizable equipment that's not just a magnetic placard slapped on the side of a tractor, right? So the more believable you make it, the less likely it is that someone is going to ask questions. The more likely it is that you're going to get away with that cargo.
Excellent. We'll do one more, and then I'll let you go answer some of the other ones in the chat. So, and folks, if you have any other questions, please do throw them in the Q&A. Danny's going to try to get through some of these. But interesting one here about inside jobs. So, how often, Danny, do you see an inside job a factor in these cargo theft cases? And when you do see it, what do those red flags look like?
Yeah, the red flags are going to be consistency, right? Unfortunately, you need multiple data points to identify consistency. But I will say, the driver did it is very much the butler did it of the cargo theft world, right? It's typically not the drivers, but at some point, some form of inside information is used in a large amount, a large share of especially strategic thefts. But that inside information doesn't necessarily come from your workforce. That inside information could be because they've got a carrier in their network who's not performing any criminal action, who's just gathering intelligence, and that intelligence includes, the paperwork that they're given, the procedures that they're given for high value loads, and what the drop off procedures and policies look like as well. But yeah, inside information is definitely a threat. It's hard for me to tell you this is how you identify it without knowing exactly what kind of insider threat we're looking at and exactly what the scenario is. But it's definitely always a threat, and we've seen it more often with temporary workforces, which I know are common in logistics. But it obviously introduces vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Well, and they're so good with their paperwork now too, in the editing and the stuff that you almost feel like, well, you should have known better, but it's
Not
it's
anymore.
hard,
Yeah.
yeah, not anymore. You think that they have to be involved, but
Yeah.
that's not the case. It's not
And
necessarily.
that's the thing too. When we talk about AI, folks have taken to requesting verification photos, right? If a driver's on the road and we get a sensor reading or something, we want to verify the integrity of the load. I don't think folks realize how easy it is to generate a very realistic looking photo with AI, especially if you have source material, right? If I have a picture of the tractor trailer I'm driving and I go onto Google Maps and grab a screenshot from Street View of a truck stop, and I plug those both into Chat GPT and says, hey, make this tractor trailer look like it's parked at this truck stop, it'll do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Danny, thank you again. That was just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I hope everybody got a little something to take away from that. I know there's a lot of people asking for the PDF and for some follow-up information there. So I'll let you address that in the Q&A, and I'm gonna share screen again real quick here. And we are gonna talk to Miss Jessica Lawrence from UPS. Jack, you want to introduce Jessica and start off our next section?
Absolutely. Well, that was a great session, what we just went through. There was an awful lot of information there, and it's scary how in-depth some of these things are. But next up, we have Jessica Lawrence, who is with United Parcel Service. Jessica's our friend. She's been with us before. Jessica, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, can you just remind everybody a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I'm Jessica Lawrence. I'm a vice president here at UPS. And obviously, cargo theft is very important to us. We're one of the largest users of rail, but we also obviously move goods across the country via our trucks. And so, in partnership with the Supply Chain Coalition, which includes companies such as BNSF, UPS, FedEx, Travelers Insurance, and tons of other associations such as ATA, AAR, NAM, TIA, RELA, and World Shipping Council. We work together to try to move legislation on the Hill to combat this legislatively, to give power to federal resources to start really taking this kind of theft seriously.
Well, we understand you have some important updates for us.
Absolutely. And I'm going to share my screen so that everyone can see and we can get started, and hopefully it all works. And you can see my screen, everybody?
We can
Right.
now.
Yep.
And is it the correct? I think I need to switch my views, right?
Yes,
Yep.
you do.
All right, look at that. I'll get the hang of it.
There
So
we
yeah,
go.
so today I want to kind of talk about some of the things that are happening here on Capitol Hill. I'm also going to touch on some recent Department of Transportation activity that recently came out to make everyone aware. And then at the very end, I kind of put together a call to action this time. Instead of just informing everybody, I think it's time that as an industry, we all stand arm in arm to start really voicing our concerns around this type of theft. So as before, I talked kind of about the Supply Chain Coalition. I listed all the associations that we work with. So all the members of these associations, as well as individual companies that I had mentioned earlier. The main part of the legislation we're really kind of pushing, and when I was on last time, I talked that there were two pieces of legislation. It was called Safeguarding Our Supply Chain Act, which kind of dealt with rail and road. And then there was Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, CORCA in other words, that was more focused on retail. We were successfully able to combine those two bills into one bill that we're all as an industry. So rail, retail are all pushing the same legislation and concerted effort from a Capitol Hill perspective. So this legislation was introduced earlier this Congress. So in the early 2025 time period, we have, this Congress lasts for 2 years. So we have until December of 2026 for this Congress. Right now, we're very successful in getting co-sponsors. We're up to 157. The magic number, as we like to joke here in DC, is 218. Once you get to 218, that's more than 50% of the legislative body in the House, and you get more than 60 in the Senate. That means collectively, you would want this legislation to pass more than 50% in the House, and more than you need a vote of 60 or more in the Senate would mean that you would be able to pass this bill if it were voted on tomorrow. So it is the same exact legislation in the Senate and the House, so it's bipartisan and bicameral. And the main thrust of the legislation is two parts. The first creates a multi-agency national response through Homeland Security investigation, which is housed under DHS. They would create a center that would help coordinate local resources, state, federal resources, all under one. It would take care of this kind of jurisdictional issue. If you're combating this crime or you're working with law enforcement, and from your company having multiple locations, maybe across state lines or even within different counties, you could run into some jurisdictional issues. This would eliminate that and allow folks from San Diego, California to work with, or understand the crime that's happening in Phoenix, Arizona, or even, Orlando, Florida. It would be able to connect those dots in a way that isn't really happening today, and do a much larger case against this organized crime when it's happening, recognize the trends that are happening, and be able to then prosecute those crimes. It also expands criminal offenses. So there is a asset forfeiture to the property purchased with proceeds or things used in proceeds of the crime that takes place. So that helps the funding of the bill. If anyone's familiar with how Capitol Hill works, everything comes with a price, and it either increases the deficit or decreases the deficit. And we were we learned earlier, and we're waiting for the official count, but that this bill would essentially decrease the deficit. We don't know by how much, but that is a very good mechanism for getting it to either ride along on other bills, stand alone, be used in budgeting purposes. So by having a bill that does that, it makes it much more attractive. We're hoping that we will get the final report for that, and I'll be sure to share that with Loss Prevention Magazine when it does come out, because that would be kind of a feather in our cap to this bill. And as I said, it does create the center under Homeland Security, national resources to kind of start combating this in conjunction with what's already happening on the ground. So other parts of legislation that are happening in the fiscal year 26 appropriations, there are 3 different initiatives to combat cargo theft. So House CJS, that is Commerce, Judiciary, and Science appropriations. They particularly put forth $2 million for special prosecutors to really look at this crime, take what hopefully would come out of an HSI center and begin prosecuting this at a much larger scale than is happening today. It also has talking about, again, in the Senate CJS, it kind of not necessarily mirrors the language of the House bill, but is mentioned in the CJS appropriations. So the way that normally works is when both Senate and House pass these and they get passed off the floor, it then goes to conference to negotiate what gets included in the final version to be voted on. So by the mere fact that they're both mentioned is a great step forward on the prosecution of this crime. Final language obviously to be decided in conference if appropriation bills were ever passed, but we'll have to wait and see what that looks like for fiscal year 2026. And then lastly, I want to point out the Homeland Security appropriations in the report. It also recognized the center that was mentioned in the bill. This is a great step forward. Appropriations don't make it a law. They can put funding towards it, but we need CORCA to kind of solidify and codify the actual center to keep it going and keep it funded. But this is a great step forward and a great way to start funding a center to start collecting this data and using this data cross-functionally and interstate, as well as multi-jurisdictional. Department of Transportation, as I stated earlier, does have a new request for information, and the link is here, and I will make sure that this is PDF'd and they can send it out to everyone so you can click on these links. But the Protecting America's Supply Chain from Cargo Theft, it is an RFI where it's a various questions asked from stakeholders to respond to. Here are just some sample questions that I pulled from the RFI, where your company, your association, other associations you belong to, your chamber of commerce is in your state. I know ATA has state boards. Some of you belong on CORCA or the retail crime boards that you'll sit on in your states that I know folks in here belong to. All of those, it's open to any stakeholder who wants to respond to the type of risks and thefts that are occurring throughout the United States in order to help develop a plan around it. Please know that Department of Transportation does not have any law enforcement authority. So this is more probably recommendations or stand up a task force to look at it, have industry input. But this again allows folks who participate to have a voice in what's happening and how policy is structured. I, on the other hand, think it's great to participate because, and not just each individual company. Could you imagine if every company in the United States that faced this just wrote in and said, pass CORCA, or this is crime, create a national response? No statistics, no nothing. If we all banded together, again, arm in arm, and called for the passage of this bill, as well as standing up saying this is a problem. So many folks, and I know brands don't want to be out in front saying, don't use me, I have cargo theft in my network, but collectively, if we use our associations, we use our Chamber of Commerce, we use, our attorney generals and the folks that we elect to voice our concerns, or even band together in these organized crime boards and groups that everyone sits on, law enforcement, your local law enforcement that you've been working with, who stand up and say, we need help, we need a national response, I think would be extremely beneficial. So as I started this, I said that I wanted to end with a call to action. And so I put in here the list of co-sponsors. This link under the House and Senate takes you directly to the bill's website and shows you all 157 members. So if you have operations in certain states, you can see if those representatives are on there, as well as senators. And then if you are so inclined to write a note or even a quick email to these members of Congress asking for the passage of Corca, we're coming up to some very important dates leading up and into October. We believe that there may be some Senate movement. And so if we're able to, through a markup of the bill, if we're able to show, again, a concerted effort that this is impactful and this is the type of response we need to get this crime under control, or at least addressed, now's the time to do that. And then obviously responding to the Department of Transportation, that's very, very easy. You literally could write an email, you can put it in a Word document. It doesn't have to be on letterhead, it can be on letterhead, and put it in, say, I'm a concerned citizen, I work for this company, and this is a huge issue for my company. And then, you can answer the questions one for one, or you can say, hey, pass Corca. We need a federal response. That, obviously it is up to you if you choose to respond, but it is, I'm urging everybody to now, it's ripe. Now is the time to stand up and say this is an issue. And if we want this to be taken seriously at a national level, I believe that these are the two mechanisms which to do that. So with that, I will turn it back to our trusty friends at Loss Prevention Magazine and answer any questions.
Jessica, that's great. And well, you stole my thunder, because I don't get to ask the what can we do to help support you, Jessica? You guys have been doing a phenomenal job, and I know you're working tirelessly to try to get this over the finish line. And obviously, these numbers are way higher than they were, right? As far as the support that you've been able to harness, and get a lot of these senators and Congress people on board. So kudos to you, and I know you're part of a group of your own, as well as other groups that are out there. I think if we can get that call to action to have folks, try to submit to your congressperson. You mentioned that there's the list of the 457, I think, or something that are there, but how do we get the ones that are not on there and get them over the line, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we could, just where you have operations in those states, hey, this is an issue for me, or where crime is happening in your network. Hey, we're having a big issue in Chicago, not to throw Chicago under the bus, but you get what I'm saying, to really start voicing it. And of course UPS has a stake in it, but it's really it's the small business owners, it's the one driver truck company, it's folks who are dealing with this, or small businesses who don't know who to turn to, right? And so this center would give so many people a voice in being able to report their crime. The goal of the center would be, if you had your local law enforcement investigates the crime, you can then take that case to the center, and it's added to all the cases that are happening, so that connection can be made, and that it's not isolated. None of this is isolated. Yes, there is crime of opportunity, but 9 times out of 10, if it's a large amount, it's not isolated. And so being able to connect those dots is really important.
Excellent. Well, Jessica, if you could maybe stick around for a couple minutes and go into the Q&A, if there are some questions there that you're able to respond to, and then if there are, I know you said you could PDF this and have us send it out. So if you get that PDF over to us, we can make sure we can take that one and the one from Danny and make sure that we send it to the folks who registered for today's session. So thank you again very, very much for the time today. Thanks for all that you're doing to help lead this effort. And let's go get them. Let's let's
Absolutely, absolutely.
saying it
And,
out
and I will
loud.
make sure I add my contact information. If you do have questions around it, feel free to reach out and I can point you in the right direction.
Awesome.
Jessica, we have a pretty good feel for how this works. I mean, it seems like this has been going on forever to try to get this thing passed. How realistically, best guess, how close are we to actually getting this done?
Numbers help. Having the White House weigh in is always beneficial. So we're hoping to continue to build that relationship with the administration for them to understand there's a lot of resources being, HSI is being tugged in a lot of directions right now per executive orders. So I think it's more that we continue to support this legislation because we're all our eggs are in one basket, so to say. And, if we creep up to that 218 number, which easily, if everyone on this call did one email, we would get there pretty quickly. And with a bill that potentially reduces the deficit, I mean, we could blink and it could be passed. But I think we got to get that support there. And that's what the industry should be stepping in to do.
Excellent. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Jessica, and everybody out there. Let's get out there and let's help drive this cause. And speaking of driving causes, we had our last presenters today are from the ISCPO, Byron and Tracy. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing good. That was really good.
Awesome.
Right? Jack,
Glad
you
to
want
be here.
to introduce our last session here?
Absolutely. In this session, we've got Byron Smith. And with ISCPO, we've got Tracy Nini, our good friends. Byron, your title is now the chairman, correct?
Yes, president and chairman. Yep.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself here to get us started?
Sure.
Most
35
everybody
years.
knows you already, but
Yeah, I
but
see a
let's
lot
go
of, I
into
see a
the
lot of
formalities.
familiar names in the group on the webinar right now. So 35 years practitioner in loss prevention and asset protection, many large box retailers. I've been involved with the ISCPO now since its inception in 2014, one of the founding members. And the ISCPO, for those who do not know, is focused around an organization that helps and partners with supply chain security professionals that helps them address issues and look for innovation to addressing those opportunities.
Right, terrific. Again, welcome.
Thank you.
And Tracy,
Hello.
go ahead and give us a little bit about yourself. Like I said,
Um,
most of us already know who you are, but
Okay,
for
thank you
those
for
that
that.
don't, let's go ahead and give them a little background and your new role here with ISCPO.
I was invited to join the ISCPO a couple of years ago, and this year asked to vice chair. I have been in loss prevention and security for 36 years now, recruiting and staffing for companies across the nation. I also acquired lpjobs.com a couple of years ago, so I'm staying busy. The ISCPO has been a learning lane for me. I've enjoyed learning more, not just about retail and corporate security, but this cargo theft, and it's kind of my new mission. So really happy to be here.
Well, the two of you have some important updates for us. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you and take it from there.
Well, I think we're gonna start with Byron.
Okay.
I think Byron, we heard a lot about strategic theft from Danny. But beyond the fictitious pickups and the strategic thefts and from your perspective and ISCPO and what you're hearing out there, what are some of the new tactics that criminals are using to exploit the vulnerabilities in today's supply chain?
Yeah, Danny kind of mentioned a whole gamut of opportunities that we see out there, including manipulating BOLs and driver falsification documents. The other piece is really talking about supply chain attacks where offshore individuals are trying to infiltrate your supply chain software and coding that so they can have access to that to look at your BOLs and all your transportation documents. Talked about recruiting insiders, not only the people that work for you, but your third-party partners. Consider your security providers or your truck leasing company that might be involved as well. We're hearing many many folks talk about those opportunities. And then the public data exploitation. So if your drivers are active on social media or your members in your warehouse are active on social media talking about what's happening today, this is what's going out type stuff, allows the organized crime groups to build that database of information. And I think some of the other things that we're seeing from a technology component is many of us are using GPS tracking devices on the trailers and items that are high value. But there's jamming technology out there, and there's GPS location devices that can be easily had, and so they can disable those items. So I think the last piece, a little bit talked about AI. Danny talked about AI, but the voice cloning. So just imagine the fraudster is calling the dispatch call center and has captured maybe 5 minutes of an individual's voice. Now that voice can be used to create deep fakes and manipulate when they're talking to drivers and things like that. So that's some of the opportunities that some of our members have mentioned, most recently at our Mexico summit last month, and they talked about those opportunities.
You know, Byron, we've talked a lot about a lot of these methods. You know, based on some of the more current data, there are certain commodities that are consistently targeted, right?
Yep.
What do you see as the top items that are currently involved in cargo theft? And what do you think that makes them such an attractive target for most of these groups? For example, you know, we've heard that, you know, food and beverages are at the top of a lot of these lists.
Well,
That might surprise some of us. Why do you think these categories are so vulnerable, and what are we doing?
Just like Danny mentioned, the shopping lists that are out there from these organized crime groups, food and beverage, it's a highly sought after, highly desirable product. It's perishable, so it moves quickly. It can be flipped very, very quickly. And then you look at, you know, the dairy, seafood, and the various meat products that can be stolen and sold throughout the marketplace. Also, alcohol is a large commodity along with tobacco, right? Because of the quick resale. Danny mentioned the investments. You're making the equipment. Well, these quick turnovers for these large trucks, you could have $250,000 worth of Patron on this trailer and can convert that fairly quickly to be moved overseas. So we're seeing some things like that. Other items, apparel, as we've seen in some of these rail thefts with Nike and Reebok. We've seen building materials. Copper has always been an issue, still continues to be an issue. So those are some of the things that we're seeing around the commodities.
You know, you mentioned overseas, and you know, we've got a lot of these groups being way more organized, far more transnational. I mean, you don't have to be in this country to steal theft and steal cargo in this country, right? I don't need to break a seal. I don't need to be here by the truck. I could be literally thousands of miles away. So as these groups are getting more organized and transnational, how should companies adjust their, you know, their risk management strategy and both, you know, for domestic and for international freight movement?
Well, I would say most important is collaboration. So here in the US and Canada, we've experienced it for a number of years. And we're seeing this from our members in Europe. We've got a London summit coming up next month, and that's one of our topics. So just happen, you know, looking at all those opportunities again, how can we collaborate and share what we've learned and the intel we have here, and then move across over to Europe or even Asia. You know, looking at activity that should be invested in, so like multi-factor authentication for your drivers, for your BOLs, simple things like employee training, driver training, warehouse dock loading training, and then, you know, doing a business impact analysis on your facility and looking at what is my penetration, what are my faults, what are my areas of concern, stuff that we've learned here. Danny talked about, you know, parking your trucks at a secured parking area, not around the warehouse. That's a learning here that Europe is starting to pick up on and invest into these large truck areas, secured truck areas for their drivers and their freight.
Makes sense. Great advice.
Yeah.
You know, you guys have done a terrific job with all this. You know, I think back when you guys first got started, you were writing stuff down on napkins, kind of like a Beatles song, Um,
Well, that's how it got started, Jack. I mean, we
Yeah.
were sitting at another large loss prevention conference. There were three of us having a beer. And we said, there's no topics about supply chain at this conference. How do we
that
fix
always
that?
makes you a little smarter, right?
Yeah, how do we fix that? And
Yeah.
so we said, oh, we'll create our own organization to talk about it. And that's how the ISCPO happened, now going into 11 years. So, yeah.
It stands for the International Supply Chain Protection Organization, if anybody's wondering. It's a long one, but we cover a lot of topics. And as Byron mentioned, we do have a couple of meetings coming up. London on October 7th, 16th, and Toronto, November 12th. One of the things we're doing is really building the membership up. So anybody that's here before you all dip, because you've got another call to take, we'd love to invite you to the website and to come join us. We're building our membership, and we're really procuring some amazing tech and solution providers to bring really easy solutions that are addressing all the problems we're talking about today, cutting edge stuff, and we're vetting them. We're having limited amount of vendors. It's not a big circus show. We have 1-day summits. They're very intense in content and very deliverable and manageable. So we'd love to have you come check us out and join us. That was my
Tracy,
pitch.
and I
That's
know
it.
I jumped ahead here a little bit to get
Sorry.
I get excited about it. And what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you? What do you feel is the best method for them to reach out and get more involved?
Yeah, for me and for the ISCPO, we're very active on LinkedIn. So please feel free to DM me. I'm easy to find. If you want to go to the website, it's iscpo.org, and you'll quickly find us. Look at the board of directors, and you'll see Tracy and I there, and our LinkedIn connections will be right there.
I know I just kind of slid that in. Sorry, but I looking at the
No.
hour, I'm like, people are going to start leaving. I want them to know we're here.
No, and that was actually the next question, Tracy, was to get an update from you on what's going on, and you
jumped right in.
Bibbing.
jumped right in.
You
You
know
and I
me.
share the same brain sometimes, so you probably just picked up on that. You probably heard the question that wasn't asked.
One of the things we're really focusing on is building up the retail segment, supply chain, and we're also going to be growing the 3PLs, the medium-sized cargo companies, people that maybe aren't on the level or the resources that the larger organizations have, because as these thieves, I refuse to call them bad actors because they're just thieves, continue to utilize tech and get around our parameters, we need to have a united front. And so including everybody, and we're going very educational. We're looking at possibly doing training modules. We're getting really creative on how to bring information directly to you quickly and easily, because we know you have enough going on in your day. So we want to become just a really great, easy resource for you to tap into. And we've got a lot coming up that I'm very excited about.
Well, we love partnering with you guys on this type of content when we do, the supply chain side of anything, ORC related and theft related like this. So, and you guys have always been great partners. So I definitely encourage everybody who's listening to reach out, get involved, and just continue. Wish you guys success in continuing to grow the organization. I love that you're doing these international sessions. That you're up in Canada, over on my side of the pond here, and hope to get up to London and check you guys out. So, thank you again for the time today, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
feel
you.
free to hit me up directly on LinkedIn. Anybody, happy to
Thank you.
help answer any questions.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. All right. So, with that said. Come on, there we go. All right. Before we go, and thanks for all the love, everybody. Appreciate all the feedback for our speakers today. These guys did a great job today, absolutely great job today. Got to thank our sponsors too, LVT and Genetec, Checkpoint Systems, and Sensormatic. Thank you for your support, and thank you for you supporting them, supporting us, because we wouldn't be able to do these sessions without them. And we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys tuning in. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, LPF, for being our education partner. Thanks for putting those 2 CEU credits on the table for all of our LPC certified folks that are out there. Loss Prevention Magazine, there's that QR code. And if you can't scan that, let's go to losspreventionmedia.com. Make sure that you are subscribed. It's a free magazine, folks. It is a absolutely critical tool in your education and information for this industry. So if you're going to be in this industry, you better have that magazine coming to your home or office. And I think that's about it. So, Jack, any closing thoughts?
Well, Kevin, it's getting harder and harder to raise this bar. We've had some great speakers once again. As always, we've got a great audience. There's been some great questions. And we look forward to the next time we can do one of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Byron. Appreciate you more than you know. Thank you very much for joining us today and for supporting us. The audience loves you. We love you. And everybody stay safe. And we'll see you next month. We got ORC in October. And we've got a really good session lining up for that one. So we'll see you in October. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.